Hello and welcome to the Content Bite. We're a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a journalist, copywriter and content producer and the founder of Rachel's List. But the Content Bite is actually a duo if you're a new listener. And my co-host Lynne Testoni is here too, albeit from her holiday house this week, which I'm completely envious about.
Hi, Rachel. Lovely to see you again.
Hi, Lynne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lynne Testoni. I'm also a writer, content creator and a journalist. But don't envy me, Rachel, because I'm painting the spare room while I'm up at the holiday house, working in between. And I wish I was just lying on the deck watching the boats go by. No.
Oh, it's
and
a hard life.
It is a hard life. And today's subject is one I feel really strongly about, and I know you do too, internships. Unpaid internships have become more common, and I think in tough economic times like the ones we're going through at the moment, they can be seen as a way to get cheap labour. What do you think, Rach?
I think more like free labour.
Free labour, yeah, true.
But yeah, look, I think there's a lot of shifty underhand. Well, let me just say, I think that there's a lot of really great internship programs out there, and they can be a great experience, as we'll talk about, further on in the episode. But I think there's also a lot of shifty and underhand stuff that goes on by some companies. And I wrote an article on internships, which is on the blog. We'll put it in the show notes. After I was on a panel discussion talking about that from Umbrella a few years ago. Because I think that that's the problem. That's why they get so much discussion, because they can be this exploitative thing.
Do you get many requests to advertise internships on Rachel's List?
We do, but if they're not paid, we say no. And even though we have an entry-level list, any job that we put up has to be a paid role. So, if it's an unpaid internship, we just turn them away, unfortunately, which is sad. You don't want to turn away money, but I think that interns should be paid unless the placement is part of a sort of uni or school course and they have that proper program set up. But I've learned a lot about internships actually from Catherine Boris, and she runs the Young Australian Writers group on Facebook and often posts about the Fair Work Act and the legal requirements for internships. And
so we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
I think so, yeah. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal expert, but from what I understand, it's not okay to pay the person. It's okay not to pay the person if they're a student and they're part of that vocational placement. But if they're in an employment relationship with the business that they're doing the work for, they should be paid minimum wage. And, how do you figure out if they're in that employment relationship, I suppose, is the tricky one.
That is the tricky one.
Yeah, I think you've got to look at what they're doing. So if you're making them do work that you would otherwise give to a staffer and that helps you run your business, rather than giving them sort of work experience, then that's a sign that they're more of an employee. And also if you have them interning for you for years on end, I mean, that person is an employee. You can't make someone intern for 3 years.
I know, people do though. And I've also read a few articles in recent years that argue that unpaid internships favour wealthier young people because they can afford to work for nothing effectively. And that tends to make the industry sort of more elite, and which is not a good thing.
Yeah, that definitely came up in that Umbrella panel, this whole elitism. But I think also, like, it's a risk if you're going to do that as a company with the whole social media and people sharing, details of dodgy companies and stuff. It is really a massive risk to your brand and, to your company's reputation.
Yeah, I saw a lot when I had time in women's magazines. There were a lot of internships, particularly at the prestige end, I could say. I remember looking to hire an editorial coordinator when I was at ACP, as Bauer was known then, and I was horrified to see how many people were already in the building working for nothing.
Wow.
There was one girl who had been working on a fashion magazine for 2 years, 1 day a week for free. And obviously after 2 years, she would have been contributing as an employee.
Not on. That is not on, is it? Oh, my God.
And I know a writer who is a friend of mine, but she worked full-time for, I think, almost 6 months at a well-known interiors magazine for free before she was offered some part-time paid work.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to work nights in a pub to get by. And,
Just
I don't
really
think
unethical of these magazines and these companies, you know. I think they get used to the labour and they get used to that kind of dynamic, and then they think, we don't have the budget, so we'll just keep it going another month or so.
I think also one of the companies I work for, a really large one, I don't think they realised how endemic it was, and then they discovered it was all sort of done sort of sleight of hand, and they put a stop to it, and they've got a bit more of a proper policy in place.
Yep.
And I also don't think that women's magazines don't have the glamour that they used to. So they don't get as many people wanting to intern. They're probably, I don't know, maybe influencers are using interns now, or some other new form of media. They're pretty big in PR.
Yeah, but also a lot of the glossies are gone now, so there isn't even those opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there are some positives. We didn't want to be totally negative. So what are the positives, do you reckon?
Yeah, look, I think that they can be really rewarding. I think they can be really useful, especially if you are actually learning something or shadowing someone who has the kind of dream job that you aspire to having one day. I think that's the definition of a really brilliant internship. You know, if you are actually learning the ropes of that dream job. And I think that there's nothing like seeing the day-to-day activities of a workplace to really understand the industry. And if you're lucky, it could end up in, leaving with some really great clippings and an amazing letter of introduction that, opens the door to a paid position somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's often the case. I think you can't transition into a paid position when everyone's used to you as the intern. You often have to leave and go somewhere else in order to. So that is something. But there was an article in The Guardian this week about, the magazine closures that we keep talking about, because it's just bloody awful. But on the intern side of things, they gave those people the start in the industry, and those opportunities are being lost now.
Yeah, they are, which is sad. And I agree that I think the practical experience teaches you so much more than you could ever learn at uni. Particularly things like interviewing skills, like people skills, like being part of a team, even things like SEO. And also with content and media changing all the time, I sometimes wonder if universities can remain up to date with all the technological changes. I mean, you and I are living it, and we're always having to work hard to keep up to date.
Yeah.
So an internship also helped you identify which part of the industry interests you most, and helps you make those connections, because, as we say, it's all about relationship and who you know. And I have given pay jobs to many of the interns that I've worked with, and I've also recommended them to colleagues that are looking to hire entry-level staff. So,
oh, you're lovely.
Well, if they're good, it's great. And people often ask me if I know of somebody. So, and also, though, I did read an article ages ago, I couldn't find it for this, but said, well, 1 or 2 internships can help you get the foot in the door. After the benefits don't grow. So there are some people I've seen, which is a bit sad, that they do 5 or 6 internships thinking that'll make them more employable, but there's no evidence to say that 1 or 2 is enough. You don't have to keep on working for free for years.
And also you think of people, young people who are coming from remote areas to do an on-site internship. I'm not sure how much that's going on right now, obviously, but do an on-site internship, but they have to pay rent. They've got to work on the side just to get that, that experience. And then if it doesn't go anywhere, or it doesn't, give them a letter of recommendation, or even, an introduction to someone who might perhaps hire them, it can be extremely expensive. And not many people can afford that, or to send their graduates away and pay for their rent and everything just so they can get that experience.
Yeah, exactly. So where do you think the best places to find good internships, the sort of ethical ones we're talking about, Rach?
Well, so this is for young people who may be listening. We have an entry-level list which you can join. We'll put it in the show notes. That's free to join, and we sometimes do get some paid internships coming through or some junior writing jobs coming through on that one. So, yeah, definitely keep an eye on jobs boards because there are a lot of internships advertised these days. But I would also, do a bit of research yourself and seek out your own internships because I think even though there might not be the glossy mag that you had in mind doing one on, it's really worth considering, that you can experience the inner workings of a magazine on titles that aren't necessarily consumer mags. So that's something to consider. You might find a trade magazine that really dovetails with your interests, and you could see if they have an intern program, and that could just be another foot in the door. Actually, that brings me to another blog post that Rachel Worsley wrote for us, and it was all about a backdoor into journalism, and it's just brilliant. So we're going to put that in the show notes too, and it might give you some ideas on getting in.
I find it's best to start with your friends and family, or colleges and universities can help. They often know which companies do some formal internships. I had somebody spend time with me recently who was a high school student, but I don't know many companies that accept school students anymore. None of the publishers I know do. I know News Corp has a formalised intern process when I've worked there with a few interns around the building at a time that HR manages, and that's something to look at. But I think it's only about 6 interns at a time last time I checked, and that's not a lot because it's Australia's largest media organisation. So, but don't restrict yourself to writing internships. Radio and audio is a good option, as is TV or video work, because even if you're interested in writing, and we've talked a lot about this, haven't we, Rach? Learning about those areas makes you more employable as well, and that's often a good adjunct. The same with styling. Or photography, often quite helpful.
Absolutely. I did a photography work experiences with a photographer for one of my work experience slots. And, and it was brilliant. It kind of helped me figure out whether I wanted to be a journalist or a photographer. But I love those ideas, go into other areas. You just don't know where it's going to lead or what you're going to end up loving,
And I do think we're all sort of multi-skilling now. It's good to understand or appreciate different skills, and the visuals are definitely important now. And as we mentioned before, check if you're not sure about the rules around internships. It's worth checking out the government guidelines, and we'll put a link in the show notes through Fair Work. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And also if you are, at that point in your career where you're considering interning somewhere, we think that you probably shouldn't, start the internship until you ask a few questions of the company.
Good idea.
So, yeah, you definitely want to know how long the internship is. If there's no end date to it, I think that's a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
You probably want there to be an end date. You could maybe be a really intensive 2-week internship, or it could be 1 day a week for 3 months, but that's something that you want to know at the start. You also want to know what kinds of work and tasks you'll be doing, whether you will actually come out of it with any clippings that you can use, or whether you're only going to be doing admin-y tasks, and then you think, well, is this a, free labour situation and a good use of my time? Yeah. And so will you be doing work that a staff member might otherwise do? That's a really interesting one. You might not know that until you're actually in it, which is a bit of a bugger, but finding out that detail if you can is good. Also, how much of your time is required? How strict are they? How many hours, do they want you for, and how many days, and that sort of thing. Probably also good to say, are there any potential work opportunities or freelancing opportunities, with the company at the end of it, if I prove myself and do a good job. And also I think you should also ask, who will I be working with? Who will I be shadowing? Just to make sure that they're really fitting you with the right person and giving you that work experience that you want. And I think also finding out all that information raises any potential red flags as to whether you are being shoehorned in for a little free labour or whether the company is really going to give you some valuable work experience, which is what you want.
One thing you can also ask is if you're reimbursed for travel expenses. A lot of companies do that. A company I worked for did that with our interns. And plus all of them were offered part-time work at the end of the, I think it was 12 weeks, and they did 1 day a week.
Yep.
For 12 weeks, they ended up with clippings, and we paid travel expenses as well. So that just meant that they weren't losing money to work there, which is important.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end of the episode, but thank you, everybody.
Yes, thanks. So hopefully you can feel free to connect us with us on Facebook at The Content Bite, or email us at thecontentbite@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Head to rachelslist.com.au/blog to grab the show notes for this episode. And yep, we'll be back in your ear holes next week.
Fantastic. Bye.
That sounded gross, didn't it? Sorry, everyone. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.